use this, so we're just going to go back to that and go without it. Technical difficulties, that's all right. We started with the general rule last week that said rules without relationships lead to rebellion. And most parents make a mistake in one of the two extremes. They're either all about rules and there's no relationship, or they're all about a relationship and there's no rules. And the key to raising G-rated kids in an R-rated world is the fact that we're going to need to be balanced in this area. So last week, we started to look at some principles to help us get there. There's 10 principles total. We looked at 4 last week. We looked at the principle number 1 of the need to spend time with your children. And we said last week that generations of kids today, our generation of children today, are experience rich, but they're relationship poor. And we need to spend time with our children. We also said last Sunday that we need to let our kids know often that we love them just the way they are. They need to hear that from us. They need to hear it often from us. We don't love them more than when they get an A than we do them when they get a D. We don't love them more when they get a hit than we do when they strike out. We love them just the way they are. Number 3 last week, we saw this. You need to discipline your children when they need it. And they need it. And we looked at 4 principles regarding that. That our discipline must be consistent. It must be controlled. It must be compassionate. And it must be consequential. And then finally last week, we looked at the need to pray for our children regularly. And I gave you 15 specific ways to pray for your kids. Now, I want to move on this morning, and I want to give you 6 more principles. So let's get right into it. The next principle we're going to look at is this. Always be honest with your children. Always be honest with your children. One of the greatest ways that you can ruin any relationship you're in is to tell a lie. And that's true of parents and grandparents as well as guardians. And maybe you're sitting here watching at home or watching at our Sioux campus and you're going, I'm not a parent, grandparent, or guardian. This really doesn't apply to me. Well, most of these principles apply to any relationship in your life. And one of the worst things you can do in any relationship you are in is to tell a lie. Look what Proverbs says in chapter 12 and verse number 17. It says, he who speaks truth tells what is right, but a false witness shares deceit. And all through Scripture, we see the principle that honesty is always the best policy. Always be honest with your children. Now, that also means this. It also means that when it comes to our children, we need to be willing to be honest with them even when it's uncomfortable. We need to give them honest answers to their honest questions. We need to have the honest, uncomfortable conversations. Daryl Hopkins. We called him Hop. He was a friend of mine in elementary school. And one afternoon at recess on the playground, Daryl Hopkins, in no uncertain terms, told me what sex was. And I remember getting furious. I remember looking at him and saying, Hop, we called him Hop. I said, Hop, my mom and dad would never do that. Boy, was I wrong. When Laura and I had kids, we made a decision. That decision was we wanted our kids to hear about sex from us. And here's why. Because we wanted our kids to have a biblical worldview, not a cultural worldview, not an American worldview, a biblical worldview about sex. And we knew the only way we could guarantee that is if we were the ones who had the uncomfortable conversation with them. And so we created an environment where the topic of sex was as welcomed at our dinner table as the topic of weather or sports. We wanted it to be something that our kids were comfortable talking about around our table, in our home, because we wanted to be sure that our kids received a biblical worldview. Now, you may be thinking, at what age are they ready to get that conversation? And here's what I would simply say. When they're old enough to begin asking questions, they're old enough to begin getting answers. Now, let me say that again. When they're old enough to begin asking questions, they're old enough to begin getting answers. I said begin getting answers. Don't dump the whole truckload of information on them at once. But when they're old enough to begin asking questions, they're old enough to begin getting answers. You see, here's what we tend to do because it's uncomfortable. We tend to say, well, listen, when you're a little bit older, we'll talk about that. That's what we tend to say, right? Why do we say that? Because we're really uncomfortable. Here's the problem. The problem is they're going to go ask somebody else. And so I really believe that we need to be willing as parents to have the honest, uncomfortable conversations with our kids. When they're old enough to begin asking, they're old enough to begin getting the answers. So the next principle we see, always be honest with your children. Here's the next one, number 6. Love your children's mother. Love your children's mother. And that's also true, the opposite, love your children's father. And I think this is crucial because we live in a culture today about our spouses. We share with our friends, we share with our coworkers, and unfortunately, we also share those things in front of our children. Now, folks, listen. I believe that one of the greatest tools you have as a parent in helping to raise G-rated kids in an R-rated world is a healthy marriage. I believe that's one of the greatest tools at your disposal. And I think one of the greatest things that we can do as parents is to make sure we never talk down our spouse in front of our children. Do you realize the number one way kids get their view of their father is by listening to what their mom says about her husband? That's the number one way they get their view of their father. Now look what the Bible says in Ephesians chapter 5. It's talking to husbands, and it says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ also loved the church. Now men, you probably have heard me say this before about this verse. I believe God in that passage gave to us men mission impossible. Impossible. He didn't just say, love your wife. If he would have said, love your wife, period, we'd be all set, wouldn't we? I could say, do you love your wife? Oh, yeah, I love my wife. Good, let's go on to the next verse. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he puts a qualifier. And the qualifier is this. Husbands, love your wife how? In the same exact way that Christ loved the church. How did Jesus love the church? Perfectly. Do you understand the problem? You see, man, you're wonderful, but you're no Jesus. And as a result, you'll never be able to love your wife perfectly. So what does that verse teach me? That there's always room for improvement. The rest of if I can never reach the apex, that means there's always room for improvement. I ought to be able to love my wife more today than I did yesterday. I ought to be able to show her more love tomorrow than I do today, more love next week than this week, more love next month than this month, more love next year than this year. And let me tell you something. When your kids see that happening, it will build within them a foundation to have strong, healthy relationships when they're an adult as well. Love your child's mother. Now, I understand that in our culture today, if statistics are true, over half the people hearing me right now in the Gospel Center, at the chapel, at the Sioux campus, at our internet campus, radio, TV, doesn't matter what the venue is, over half the people listening right now come from a divorced background. And as a result, chances are really good that your child's father or your child's mother is no longer living with you. And I also understand that some of those situations are really, really messy. I get it. I understand that. I see it all the time. But it doesn't change the principle. Listen, he may be your ex-husband, but he's still your child's father. And she may be your ex-wife, but she's still your child's mother. And I believe that one of the most damaging things that we can do is to talk down our child's mother or talk down our child's father simply because we don't get along with them anymore. Love your children's mother. Look at this quote from Josh McDowell. I think it's a great one. He says this: "The greatest thing that a father can do for his children is to love their mother." What a powerful quote. The greatest tool outside of the Bible and the church, I think the greatest tool you have in raising G-rated kids in an R-rated world is a healthy marriage. So, always be honest with your kids. Love your child's mother. Let's move on to another one. And the next principle number 7, is this: take time to listen to your children. Take time to, really listen to your children. You might be amazed if you'll just take time to listen. And I think one of the greatest mistakes we make, especially as our children get older, is we begin to talk with them less. We begin to listen to them less. And I understand that. I understand it's hard talking to teenage children because the only language they speak is grunting. That's the only language they speak. How was your date, man? What are you doing, man? Supper's about ready, man. That's all they do. But we have to take time to listen to our children. Why is it important? Well, I want you to watch this video. A video that's going to show us the importance of really listening to our children. And then we're going to talk about how to do it. Take a look.
Hey, Dad. What are you doing? Can we talk?
Sure, yeah, you bet, Emma. What's on your mind?
Can we talk about sex?
No, we can't. No.
Dad.
No, why aren't you asking your mother about these questions? You two still aren't talking? Okay, that's even more reason why we can't talk about this right now, okay? I mean, you know what? We can talk about rainbows and unicorns and puppy dogs. We could even talk about a puppy on the back of a unicorn sliding down a rainbow, but we can't talk about the sex.
Dad, I'm being serious.
And I'm being serious when I ask you, why are you being so serious when you're so young?
I'm 17.
Here's the deal. We can talk about this like when you're 35 and a half. When you're 35 and a half, we'll talk about this there.
Dad, come on.
Okay. What's brought all this on? Is it about that boy that you've been seeing? What's his name? Jimmy, Andy?
David?
David. Tell me about Andy, David, go.
David. He's really great.
And you know why he's really great?
Because he cares about me?
No, because he wants something from you. Okay? All right? I know these things. I was a boy once and they're all scum.
Oh, he's different.
No, he's not different. They're all the same. Here's the MO. First he's going to ask you on a date, then he's going to kiss you, and then he's going to want the sex.
Dad, stop.
No, we will stop. I think it's a great idea because I don't even know how we got in this conversation. Let's just stop. That's a great idea.
For once, I need you to listen to me.
I do listen to you. I pay attention to you. I provide for you. I'm there for you all the
You're
time.
so not involved in anything I do.
Well, you're springing stuff on me all the time, Emma. It's always like this.
You're supposed to want to listen to me. You're my dad.
And I will listen to you when your mother gets home.
Dad, I'm pregnant.
What did you just say?
I'm pregnant.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I think I would know.
could you hurt me like... I didn't mean that. Why? Why did this happen?
I don't know. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough or skinny enough to be anybody extraordinary. And for one night, I just wanted to feel special.
You were never ordinary. You were never ordinary.
Listen to your children. Listen to this verse from Proverbs chapter 1 and verse number 5. It says this: a wise man will hear and increase in learning, and a man of understanding will acquire wise counsel. How do we listen to our kids, especially our teenagers? It's hard. So let me do this. Let me give you 15 helps, just real quick, just some bullet points. And my hope is that for every parent, every grandparent, every guardian who is listening to me right now, that you'll be able to cling on to one of these. And by taking this one and applying it to your life, that you'll see an increase in communication with your children and with your teenagers. Here they are. Number one, and most of them deal with listening. Because parents are good talkers, they're good lecturers, they're horrible listeners. They just are. So remember, number one, mutual respect begins with listening. That's how it begins. Do you respect your children enough to hear what they have to say? I mean, really listen. Now keep in mind that communication is far more than someone's words. Speech experts will tell you that only 7% of communication are the words that you speak. 93% has nothing to do with the words. You've got to listen to more than their words. 38% of communication is the tone. Your tone and your child's tone speaks 5 times louder than their words. That's why I can come home from the office and I can say to my wife, "How was your day?" And she can go, "Fine." Now, her words said fine. But if that's all I heard, it's going to be a really long night. Because her tone spoke 5 times louder than her words. And nothing speaks louder than your nonverbal. 55% of communication has nothing to do with any sound that comes out of your mouth. 55% is all nonverbal. That's why when my kids were little and my son hit my daughter, which by the way would have been really dumb from Duke because she'd have killed him. But anyway, if he would have hit her, she probably still would. And I would have said to him, "Apologize to your sister." And he would fold his arms and hunch his shoulders and grit his teeth and go, "I'm sorry." Now, 7% of his communication said, "I'm sorry." 93% said, "Dad, please spank me." Because there's a huge difference in communication. We have to listen. I mean, really listen. Here's another one. Don't treat their problems lightly. Don't treat them lightly. I know that your teenagers' problems seem very minuscule compared to what you're facing at work and you're facing in your finances and what we're facing in our world. But they're still very real to them. So when your teenage daughter tells you that she broke up with her boyfriend and she's in tears and she's upset, don't look at her and say, "Don't worry, there's other fish in the sea." Don't treat their problems lightly. It may seem minuscule to you, but do you remember when you were a teenager? Do you remember what you felt like when your boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with you? Don't treat their problems lightly. Number 3, hear them out. Hear them out. Hear all that they have to say before you just go on your rampage. Hear them out first. By the way, that means sometimes you've got to listen beyond the choice of their words. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but teenagers aren't real good often at their choice of words, especially when they're upset or angry or irritated. And sometimes we need to hear beyond the choice of their words so we can hear what they're really saying. How about this one? Remember that listening is often better than giving advice. Think about that. We are so quick as parents when our kids share something just to give them the quick answer of here's what you should do, here's what you should do, here's how you fix that. And most of the time, I'm not sure our teenager really wants us to share with them the how to fix it. What they really want us to do is simply to listen. And one of the best ways for you to listen without simply going straight into giving advice is to ask questions. I've discovered that so often even when I do counseling. They'll give me the whole problem, and one of the first questions I'll ask is, what are your options? And then after they give me the options, I'll say, what do you think God would want you to do? And you know what I've discovered? 9 times out of 10, they already know the answer. They just want someone to listen. How about this? Realize that they may test you. Did you know that your teenagers will test you? Realize it. For example, let's say that Johnny comes home from school and mom says to Johnny, how was school today? Anything exciting happen? Yeah, Billy got kicked out of school for drinking alcohol, and I don't think that's fair because I don't think there's anything wrong with teenagers drinking alcohol. Now, let me ask you a question. In all honesty, what does the average, red-blooded, church-going, God-fearing mother respond immediately with? You what? If I ever catch you! Now, what did mom just communicate to Johnny? Johnny, you are only allowed to share your opinion if I agree with it. And if I don't agree with it, I will blast you. Now, what could mom have said? Well, mom could have said something like this. Johnny, that's interesting. Tell me, why don't you think it's wrong? Now, what did mom just do? She just said, Johnny, I want to hear more of your opinion. I want to hear more of your thoughts. Now, why is this important? Because listen, if every time Johnny shares his opinion, his thoughts that you don't agree with and you blast him, can I ask you a question? How many times will Johnny do that before he will register this conclusion? I'm not going to talk to mom anymore. I'm going to go talk to somebody else about those issues. You see, you can still, and folks, please hear me, you can still end the conversation with that one tool in the parental tool belt that we're all thankful for. You can still end that conversation with the words, as long as you live under my roof, you will abide by my rules. You can end with that as long as you've taken time to listen. I mean, really listen. Let me give you a few more. Concentrate on what they're saying. Again, sometimes that means you have to look past their words. Concentrate on not just what they're saying, but how they're saying it, their tone, their nonverbal. Here's another one. Enter your child's world. You want to have good conversation with your child? Enter their world. Let me just give you a quick quiz. Just in your mind, answer this. If you have kids, if you have grandkids, if you're a guardian, here's the question I want to ask you. Ready? Question number 1. Who does your child or grandchild sit with at lunch? Who does your child or grandchild sit with at lunch? What's the last book your child read that wasn't required for school? What's your child's favorite TV show? What's their favorite song that's out in the public currently? What's the last movie they watched? Can you answer those questions? Enter your child's world. Get to know their friends. Get to know their music. Get to know the books they read. Because the more you enter your child's world, the more you'll have the ability to communicate with them. Let me give you a few more. Do things together that they enjoy doing. Don't just do things together. Do things together they enjoy doing. I remember when I was a youth pastor and a dad named Mike came into my office and he said, Scott, I'm at wit's end with my son. I mean, we just can't talk. We don't talk. What should I do? I said, well, Mike, let me ask you a question. What's something your son is really passionate about? He said, and he rolled his eyes. He said, oh, skateboarding. He is a skateboard freak. I said, great. Then find something to do with your son that involves skateboarding. He said, but I hate skateboarding. I said, that's not the point. Find something to do with your son that involves skateboarding. Well, Mike was a construction worker. He could build things. So he said to his son, why don't we start building some skateboard ramps out in the backyard? And for the next 2 weeks after school, they spent about an hour before dinner together out in the backyard building skateboard ramps. And he came back into my office 2 weeks later. He said, that was the best thing ever. He said, I am now talking with my son at a level I never have before. Why? Because they were spending time doing something together that his son enjoyed doing. One of my fondest memories from childhood, have many of them, but one of my fondest are the many times when my dad got home from work and we had time before supper and he and I went up into the schoolyard and we just threw catch to each other. We just, for 30 minutes, maybe 40 till it was time for dinner, we just threw catch. And you know what we did the whole time we threw catch? We talked. We talked. Do things together with your children that they enjoy doing. Here's another one. Be able to keep secrets. That's a big one. Be able to keep secrets. You see, when junior high Johnny says to his mom, I think Sally's really cute. And it just so happens that junior high Johnny's mom is good friends with Sally's mom. So junior high Johnny's mom says to Sally's mom, guess what? My Johnny has a crush on your Sally. And then Sally's mom tells Sally, and it gets back to Johnny, and it will, by the way. Can I ask you a question? Do you think Johnny is going to just willingly share his heart with his mom in the future? Not in your life. But I've had to be careful about that, and I've failed many times. As a pastor, I like to share personal illustrations. And I learned real quick that I need to get my family's permission first. So the rule at our house was this. It's fair game unless you say, Dad, or honey, you cannot use that in a sermon. And everyone in the family had the trump card. They could all play it. And if they said that, it could not be used. I remember one time when my son was real small. I mean, he was a little guy. I was pastoring a church in Indiana. We had a Sunday night service. And after church, he and I were driving home. It was just him and I in the car because Laura and Joy were in another car. And I could tell my son was miffed. He was angry. I said, you mad? He said, yup. Just like that. I said, you mad at your mom? Nope. You mad at Joy? Nope. You mad at what I do? He said, laugh at me. Well, in my sermon that night, I told a story about a mouse that got into our house, and it was a hysterical story. Had nothing to do with the sermon, but I knew it would get a laugh. It was a hysterical story. And it wasn't about my son, but I happened to mention his name one time in the story. And in his mind, he knows I mentioned his name, and all the people laughed. And I had to apologize to my little boy because I broke a trust. Be able to keep secrets. Here's another one. Be willing to admit your own faults. Be willing to admit your own faults. It's okay to tell your kids about mistakes you made when you... Like, have you ever had that? I think every parent has. If not, you will. Where your child is accused of doing something. Now, they say they didn't do it, but you believe they did, and you punish them. Only to find out they really didn't do it. What do? You know what a lot of parents do? They go, well, that makes up for all the things he did and got away with. No. You go and admit your fault. Be willing to admit your own faults. Here's another one. This is big. Realize that criticism will get you a reaction, but praise will get you a response. When you're communicating with your kids, what do you want? Do you want them to react or respond? Well, hopefully you want them to respond, right? So how are we going to have our children respond? Our children respond far better to praise than criticism. Now, our children need criticism, constructive criticism. They need correction. But listen, in a lot of homes today, the only time dad ever talks to the teenager is when he's correcting them. You have to view your child like a bank. There will be times you're going to need to give them constructive criticism and correct them and take coins out of the bank. That means you better be sure you're putting enough coins of praise into the bank so you can make those withdrawals. The more you praise your child, the easier it is to correct your child later. Isn't that true about all relationships? I mean, let's be honest. We all know people, don't we? As a pastor, I know many of them who the only time they call you or email you is when they're critical about something. We all, no, don't point, but we all know people like that, don't we? Now, here's the question. Do you really take over time their critical comments serious? No. You tend to write them off even if they're legitimate because all you ever get from them is criticism and complaints. Remember, criticism gets you a reaction, praise gets you a response. Let me give you 3 more. Next one, ask their opinion. Ask their opinion. You might be shocked at the wisdom your teenager has. I know they don't act like it, but you might be shocked at the wisdom they have. I'll never forget when our family was going through a tough time. It dealt with our church. We were having to decide if we were going to stay at the church or find a new church. And that was a very tough decision for our family. And mom and dad were agonizing over that. I remember in the middle of that whole scenario, one afternoon, my dad and I are up in the schoolyard and we're throwing catch. And as we're throwing catch, and my dad probably doesn't even remember this, my dad said, Scott, what do you think we should do? I remember going, me? Now, I have no clue what I told him. And I doubt very seriously he ran home going, honey, I got the answer. I doubt that very seriously. But to this day, it means so much to me that my dad asked my opinion. Ask their opinions. And then 2 more. Plan ahead for discussions. Plan ahead. If you don't plan ahead, you're not going to get much done. By the way, I skipped over one. And the one I skipped over was ask good questions. And good questions require more than a yes or no answer. Listen, if all the questions you ask your teenager can be answered with a yes, a no, or a grunt, all you're going to get is a yes, a no, or a grunt. But if you'll plan ahead and ask them questions that require more than a yes or no response, you'll have far better conversations. And the final one is this: communicate with them on their turf. Communicate with them on their turf. Communicate with them in their bedroom. Communicate with them out in the schoolyard. Communicate with them on their turf. If the only time you ever have a discussion with your child, it begins with, son, come into my room, that's usually not a good thing, all right? Communicate with them on their turf. All right, let me give you a few more. 3 more principles, and we'll wrap it up. Here's the next one, number 8. Encourage your children often. Often. Your children need encouragement. By the way, don't we all? Seriously? Don't we all need encouragement? Don't we all need the pats on the back? Don't we all need the affirmation? Especially your children, they need it as well. Look at this verse. Look at 1 Thessalonians 5, verse 11. 1 Thessalonians 5:11 says this: therefore, encourage one another and build up one another. That is so crucial. Your children need encouragement. Now, let me give you 2 ways to do that. Number 1, encouragement involves meaningful touch. Meaningful touch. Look at this verse, if you would, from Mark chapter 1. This is a story where a leper comes to Jesus. He had leprosy. Now, back in that day, leprosy was viewed as contagious. So if you had leprosy, you were not allowed to be with people. You had to live in a leper colony. If you were walking down the road and somebody was coming towards you, you had to holler out, unclean, unclean, so that they would not come near you for fear they would get leprosy. So one day in Mark 1, a leper comes to Jesus. He breaks all the societal rules. He comes to Jesus, beseeching him, falling on his knees, and says, if you're willing, Jesus, you can make me clean. You can heal me of my leprosy. Now look what Jesus does. I think this is so powerful. It says, moved with compassion, Jesus healed him. Well, yeah, he did, but he did something first. What did he do before he healed him? Because he was moved with compassion. Moved with compassion, Jesus did what? He stretched out his hand and touched him. Think about it. This man had leprosy. I don't know how long he'd had it. Years, perhaps. Do you know how long it had been since that man had felt a meaningful human touch? Could Jesus have healed him without touching him? Yes or no? Well, sure he could have. But Jesus knew he needed much more than just physical healing. He needed the encouragement of meaningful touch. And moved with compassion, Jesus reached out and touched him. We live in a world today where all we hear about is improper touching, don't we? And that's a horrible thing. It's horrible. Unfortunately, because all we hear about is improper touching, we no longer focus on the power of meaningful touch. Your children need meaningful touch. Your spouse needs meaningful touch. People you know who are hurting need meaningful touch. And along with encouraging through meaningful touch, we also encourage them through spoken words. Through spoken words. Proverbs chapter 18, verse number 21. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. Think about this. Every time you speak to your children, you are either bringing death or life. You're either building them up or you're tearing them down. Encourage your children often. Number 9, celebrate your children's achievements. Celebrate their achievements. You don't love them more because they achieve, but you celebrate their achievements. Romans chapter 12, verse 15 says, rejoice with those who rejoice. Take time to celebrate your child's achievements. Sidney Harris said this, the best things we can give children next to good habits are good memories. That's a great quote. The next thing we can give children after good habits are good memories. And here's the last one, number 10. Be flexible with your children. Be flexible with your children. Remember, they're kids. Even your teenagers are still kids. Give them room to be kids. Give them room to make mistakes. Listen, all teenagers act crazy some of the time. Some teenagers act crazy all the time. This is normal. Why? Because they're teenagers. Be flexible. Look at this verse. I love this verse from the book of Ephesians. Look what it says. Ephesians chapter 4 says, walk in a manner worthy of the calling with which you've been called, with all humility and gentleness, with patience, showing tolerance for one another in love. What a great verse for parenting. Here's the bottom line. I saw this quote once, have no idea where it originated, but I think it's a great quote. Look at this quote. You can't do much about your ancestors, but you can influence your descendants enormously. Don't you wish you could do something about your ancestors? You can't. However, you can influence your descendants enormously. Now, I know when we go through 10 principles like these, it's really easy for parents to sit back and feel this load of guilt. Maybe you do right now. Maybe you're sitting back going, oh man, I didn't know I was this bad. I didn't know I was that bad. I'm not doing any of that. Folks, listen. This series isn't designed to make you feel guilty. This series is designed to give you something to cling on to make a difference in your child's life. I heard John Maxwell one time recite this little poem, which stuck with me. Here's what it said. Though you cannot go back and change the past, my friend, everyone can start right now and make a brand new end. Though you cannot go back and change the past, my friend, everyone can start right now and make a brand new end. So here's my question. What is that one thing that you're going to cling on to? That you're going to take away and say, okay, I'm going to put this one thing into practice. I'm going to change the end. Can't do anything about the past, but I can change the future. If you're watching online, I hope you'll right now put in the conversation at the right of your screen that one takeaway you have. If you're attending one of our campuses, I hope you'll share with somebody else that one takeaway that you're going to leave with to say, that's the one I'm going to apply to my life. Would you stand with me, please? And don't forget that next Sunday, we're going to have a great service. Next Sunday is going to be very special because instead of me preaching, I'm going to be interviewing 3 community leaders. Brian Pearson from Gaylord Schools, Sheriff Nowicki, and also Mark Morrell from DHS Foster Parent Association. And I'm going to be asking them 3 questions. Question number 1, what do you see as the greatest challenges kids in our community are facing? I can't wait to hear their answer on that. Number 2, what advice do you give to parents, grandparents, and guardians? And number 3, how can we as a church be praying for you and those who work with you? I think it's going to be a really insightful morning. I hope you'll be here. Let's pray together. So, Father, I thank you for your goodness in our lives. I thank you for all the principles that we see in Scripture that can help us change our future. Though we cannot go back and change the end, anyone can start right now and make a brand new end. We cannot go back and change the past, but we can make a brand new end. And it starts with one step. One thing we'll cling on to. One thing we'll apply to our lives. And the most thing that I'm most thankful for is that you are the greatest example of parenting we can find in the Bible. As we sang earlier, you're a good, good father. And your love for us is so deep. May we model that to our kids and our grandkids. In Jesus' name, amen.